Today we are going to talk about HTML. We're going to say, oh, what is HTML? What are some of the common elements that we should know about? And we are going to talk about this thing called the document object model, DOM. And then we are going to look how the HTML is structured. And yeah, some good practices around writing HTML documents as well. All the web pages that you visit are basically HTML. We go to BBC. So let's see this first in Trump steps. Change it as well. So all the documents that you are seeing on the internet are basically these HTML documents, right? And something special about them, all these elements are like basically standard, and that's how we create these documents for other people to use. And when you are visiting our bbc.co.uk, all you are doing is you are hitting their service saying, "Hey, can I get the landing page, please?" And they're saying, "Okay, here you go. Here's the HTML document for the landing page." Yeah. So what is HTML? It's a markup language to begin with. So he said there's this difference between a markup language and a programming language. A markup language is a language to describe a static document, right? Whereas a programming language is used to basically program things, right? So we can implement behavior, we can implement loops, we can do conditionals. The markup language doesn't concern itself with such behavior. All it cares about is like representing something like a drawing, maybe some text. So HTML was invented by Tim Berners-Lee, and it started for a way for researchers to share their papers with each other so they can easily access other people's research papers. Then obviously it evolved and become now the fundamental part of World Wide Web as we use it every day. And all these HTML documents, once it's served from BBC server, Google server, whatever your browser software, Google Chrome, Firefox, Internet Explorer, whatever, it will read that document and kind of integrate it. It will say, okay, I see this HTML document should be rendered in this manner, right? And that's the syntax for a HTML element. So it begins with the opening tag, and notice the chevrons, like chevrons, name of the element. In this case, it's the header one, biggest header you can get in a page. Then in this block here, you will put the contents of that element, and that could be a text or it could be other elements. You can nest these things. And once you're done, just close it. And chevron backslash name of the element that you want to close, then again chevron. So everything which you open should be closed. Every tag that you have opened needs to have a corresponding closing tag. Otherwise, it's not a valid HTML. And if you were to put this HTML into a page, this is the output you will get. You will get the hello world title. Now the DOM. So the DOM stands for document object model. And we said, okay, whichever page we are visiting on the internet, they will be serving us a HTML page. For the browser to do its thing, to be able to render a page in terms of showing you the visual representation of that document, it needs to form some kind of representation memory. So when the browser software visits the page, it will go, okay, let me try to parse this information. It will try to represent all that information in computer's memory, a data structure called the DOM, document object model. And it's like a tree because all HTML documents have one big HTML block that they might have different elements. This elements might have children. So it's like a tree. Yeah. And that's how the browser represents this information internally. So once the browser got this information, it is to figure out how to put this information in memory before it can be rendered. So here I can actually investigate what does that look like. Okay. This is the root HTML element, and it has two children elements. One is the head, the other is the body. I can expand the body as well. So divs, which means some kind of content. You can expand it further, expand that further. And it's always the same. So you have divs, they have other divs, or they have other elements, so on. So it's a, we have elements in our HTML document. An element have different tags, right? And these tags, these sections here, H1. So this element is a H1, we call, right? We have seen some divs. There might be anchors, there might be paragraphs, there might be links, different elements to represent different types of information in HTML page. Right? And your browser, for each given element and type, it has some defaults, right? So when I go to my document, so let's say, let's say example HTML touch index.html. So let's say I have basic HTML page. I go H1, save this document. So I guess this heading element, and it comes already with some styling for me. It's a bit bold, and it has some particular font size. And if you pay attention, it says actually this user agent style, right? So this is default styling for a H1 element in your browser. Different styles, default styles for different types of elements. Right? That's all this text. Maybe add a paragraph there. Now the paragraph has a different styling than the heading one element, right? Is that clear? Yeah. Different elements will have different defaults out of the box. We will see how we can customize this, but that's using CSS. But for the time being, just you should know that the browser gives you some defaults out of the box. So we have seen the element, so that's highlighted orange. H1 is the type of this element. Now, the elements can also have attributes. So pay attention to this bit, class heading, right? So this is an attribute. And attributes are used for customizing the behavior of that element, or it might be like, apply some styling to the element, some class to the element, or give some other functionality to the element. And they are optional. You don't need to provide unless you're trying to achieve something particular. So attributes are key values as well. So this is the key. So class is the key, and heading is the value in this example. And each element needs to have some children in most cases. So in this example, we are using, so my heading is the children of this H1 element. This is what we call a text node. So you can have two types of nodes. You can either render a text or you can render a different element. So let me show you. So let's say, so in this example, this hello HTML, this bit basic. This is a text node. That's what we call a text node. If I was to have another H1, but this H1 now needs to, let's say, contain a strong. A strong is another different type of element which makes your text bold. So I can go, oh yeah, this is even stronger type. Yeah, they look aesthetically the same, but so if you look at this one, so H1 has this hello HTML thing. So that's the text node. Whereas this H1 has another element as the children. Okay. And this child parent behavior can be repeated many times. You can have as many children as you want, as many layers as you want to this thing. At no point browser will say, oh, sorry, you can't have expense, not the Chinese government. Okay. And obviously we talked about this feature that every opening tag should be followed with a closing tag, unless the element is what we call self-enclosing, right? Sometimes you might come across elements like this. Okay, what's a good example? Yeah, maybe this one actually. Exception, just a sec, so closing. Time. Stem. Yeah. 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 Image. Okay, let's try the image one. Yeah. So if you want to have an image in your HTML document, you can use this element type called IMG, which stands for image, right? And to use it, you will need to find the image somewhere. Then let's go with this one, whatever. Copy link address or image address. There we go. There's a cat image source. So it takes a source attribute to say, okay, this is the image that I want to render. Now pay attention. I need to do this. So I'm not going to do it like, oh yeah, close the image. I don't need to do that. Uh, I can just close it in one line. Sorry. Right. Okay. Can you see the difference in the H1 and the image? Right. Even my code editor is highlighting where it's closed. Right. So it's saying it's closed there, but I'm not repeating myself saying, "Oh, image, close the image." It's just self closing because it doesn't need to have any children. It's just on its own, and it just has a single attribute, and that's it. I mean, it could have multiple attributes. The point is that it doesn't have any children. I could have had some, custom image class or whatever. I could have added other properties on top of it, but that doesn't affect it. It will be closed. It's self-closing. Yeah. This H1 is basically is to needs to be like this because it has a children. Yeah. See, it's a very big capture. Okay. Maybe we can make it smaller. We can pass a width. Alright. I don't even know its aspect ratio or whatever. Not too bad. Cool. So that's what we call a self-closing element, really. It doesn't have children. That's the main thing. Okay. Continue on. DOM tree. So again, we talked about this, the parent elements could have children, they could have children, they could have children, and indeed, from browser's perspective, it really presented as a tree, right? It was so yeah, at the top level, we have this unordered list components that have a list item, class, yeah, there, and that has a text node. The other one is like crazy, yeah. Would be the representation of this HTML document from browser's perspective. So that's what I mean by tree, DOM tree. Okay, that's a node. It has children, and its children can have other children will be represented as a tree. So when you open your Google Chrome DevTools and you look at the elements section, this representation of the page is actually the DOM tree you are seeing. And you can navigate it. You can look at different things. You can change it, if you want to. Yeah, you could change any website. But obviously it will be only your browser, right? So you could go Trump steps up, blah blah blah. Or you could go idiot. But obviously the moment you refresh, it's back to what it was because it's only your representation that you're dynamically changing. Okay, the document structure. All HTML documents needs to have a few things. The first thing is this top level doc type HTML. So this basically tells the browser which version of HTML documents that you're trying to represent, because there has been different revisions of HTML spec. And every HTML document is to start with the HTML element tag. So this one, HTML. And then obviously you have the closing tag at some point, right? And then we have this head tag. So this is very important because this tag and all of its children is kind of instructing the browser about what the page needs. So it might need to pull some styling information. It might need to pull some scripts from somewhere. It might need to set the page title, right? So this head bit is basically instructions for the browser to give some meta information about the page, not how it would render, how it would visually look, about the dependencies it has in terms of styling, scripting, page title, I don't know, search engine descriptions and things like that. Yeah. Then body is where you put your content, this body tag. So everything that you get to see rendered on the page is basically within this body block. Yeah. So let's go there. So here we had this title, right? Page title. So we could say, oh, my first web page. So I go back, pay attention. There it says document. I will say my first web page. Why? Because we put this title information into our head block of the page. So yeah, you have your computer with you. You could try creating your first HTML page yourself. It's quite easy. You just need to create a new directory, create the index HTML, and once you have once you have an empty HTML document in VS Code, you can go exclamation mark, and then you can type your way in, and it gives you a HTML page template out of the box, and then that's you change the body section. And
HTML something style.
yeah, every HTML page is pretty much looks like this. They all need to have these, the HTML, the head, the body. These are the building blocks. Let you try that after on your own. And yeah, once you have your file saved, you can open using your terminal, depending on Mac or Linux. Another thing to note in HTML world is that everything is a box. So this title, when I hover over it, you see these highlights in my browser and the orange ones. Is everything is a box. It's a rectangle. Everything will get rendered as a box. So this list item, that's a box as well. That's a box. So, that's how the browser interprets all this HTML information, is to think about in terms of boxes and render all these boxes depending on the styling, depending on the size you have on the page. So everything is a box. And boxes, okay, there are different ways you can put these boxes together, right? The main two ways is we have this display property on each element. And if you have this display block, it means that this will be a single line. It will occupy the full line on the page. Or you could have this inline display property where it will try to put the boxes next to each other until they fill a line, right? Let me show you what I mean. So let's say we have paragraphs, p tag. So some text here, or maybe just do it with divs, also called divs. Yeah. Okay, so now divs, by definition, the user agent treats them with display block. So each div will end up being one line. It will occupy the full line for that box. But if I was to change the display to be inline, inline, maybe, sorry, line, and change this one as well. Now, these two divs now, they both have this display inline property now, which means they will end up sharing a single line together, until there's no space left on that line. At that point, it will break. You see how some text here too is being shifted around once my screen is not wide enough for both of these divs to exist together on the same line. Yeah. Whereas this third element here, some text here, 3, right? It has display block. So it occupies a full line for itself. It wouldn't share with anyone. Yeah? Is that clear? Like one is display block, which means that element will occupy the full line. And the other property is display inline, which means it will try to share that line with another element until there's no space left on that line. And obviously, each element that you play with will come with some default set by the browser. So as you have seen in this example, I used the div, which comes with display block already applied on. And there are different elements which come with different defaults. You can always investigate when you open your browser and you look at, I don't know, get an element, then you look at look at the CSS, and then you can investigate, figure out what's the display. Is it block? Is it inline? Figure it out. So some common element types, we said, obviously H1 is the biggest heading that you can have. There's a variation of headings that you can have from H1 to H6, and each one is a bit smaller than the other, right? Paragraphs. If you want to have a paragraph, you use the P element type. Again, P. You can put a line break within the paragraph using the BR tag. Dividers. So divs are very common. You will see them on every page. It's the main instrument that we use to split the content into logical blocks. Lists, it is syntax, so it will have a parent UL, and then each list item will be a child of that element. Ordered list, very similar in syntax if you pay attention. The only difference is that instead of U, you got O, because this stands for unordered list, whereas this stands for ordered list, which means 1, 2, 3. So you will have a numerical order. And I didn't know, but apparently you can change this numbering as well. But more importantly, how do you link to other pages? So that's achieved using the anchor tags. So it's like A, and then you use this href attribute and pass it resource URL. And I can show you how that works. Let's say we want to link to google.com. Oh. So something like that. Now I have this link there. Yeah. Takes me to Google. Yeah. It's achieved by the anchor tag. And this is the trick. This is a trick. You need to provide the href attribute. And the value is the address that you want to visit. Then we can also pass target blank, right? This will open it in a new tab because you don't want the user to leave your website. You want them to visit the page in a different tab, right? And they can come back to you. Yeah. Target blank. By passing different attributes, I can modify the behavior of the elements, right? That's the main reason why we have attributes. And images, we already tried the image tag. It takes the source attribute, which is the target URL to an image. And alt is recommended that you provide alt tags. And alt tags are basically for people with If for whatever reason the image fails to load, let's say this image of the cat was lost from the internet and people try to render your page, they would get to see the alt text instead. That makes sense? So let's try this. Mm. Okay, so let's try this. So let's say I know that HTTP has this page does really exist on like there's no such image. We know where, and if I try to render my page, all I get to see is this. Although I can't see the image, I have a context. I know the context why the image was there at some point. Right? But more importantly, obviously, if someone, maybe a blind person, is visiting your page and they use a screen reader, obviously all they will get to hear is that alt tag. So there's an image of a surprise cat here. You know, and as we said, image tags are self-closing. Right? So it's closed on the same element. Then for so long, people were using div tags for like grouping content together because we didn't know any better. We didn't have an alternative way of organizing content in a logical manner. And then with some new HTML revision, they introduced this idea of semantic HTML tags. And for describing what the content is relevant to. So instead of putting divs everywhere, you might say, oh, this is a header, or this bit is navigation, and maybe the main content is an article. You might say, oh, we have a site menu. You might use the aside element type, and you might have a footer. So these are basic element types which you can use to wrap things together. They don't really have any representation on their own, but it's just a way of kind of collecting relevant information together. So if I was to use, let's say we want to wrap this main body here in an article tag, from visual perspective, nothing really changes. But now this content is wrapped in an article tag. And why is that useful? Again, this is useful with people with maybe they are blind or maybe they can't see the page, by using this semantic tags to order and collect relevant content together. This screen reader type of software can easily understand what to bring to the attention of the user, rather than that they don't need to see it. Screen reader can decide, oh, okay, here I need to actually prioritize article because that's the main content on this page. Yeah. And it's also good for SEO as well. Google is looking at these things and deciding, oh, you are following best practices and such.